I discovered this completely by accident, but it is kind of cool. You can actually use your cultivator on water, and in some spots it will add extra bulrushes or lily pads. After a few hundred hours in Valheim, I had no idea about this. Did you know? For smaller islands, I wanted them to be like stepping stone platforms. You may or may not have seen in a previous video that you can make a perfectly round circle by using the small horizontal beams, by rotating them just one click each time, attached to just one vertical beam. So as not to have three platforms exactly the same in a line, I expanded on the middle one by just adding some extra horizontal beams. Whilst building these three little platforms, another thought that popped into my head was, I wonder what pattern you can make with the stone blocks by using the same principle. After a fair bit of finagling, I figured out that you can actually make this work. If you place down one of the rounded black marble pieces in the water or on the floor first, you can then attach the large stone foundation pieces and rotate just one click at a time, going all the way around. It may take you a few attempts because sometimes it's difficult to line them up, but with a bit of patience and trial and error, I think you will be pleased at the end result. It ended up looking like the petals of a flower head, fitting in rather nicely to the themed garden I'm going for. The area, in my opinion, was too large just for the one bridge. I won't bore you and show you how I built the second bridge, it's just slightly narrower than the first. I just wanted it to span the wall to the other end, to join up with my main base in a more coherent manner. For extra detailing, the wolf, the raven and the serpent adornments are really good. It would be even better if we had other types of animals. Personally, I'd really like a rabbit one. What kind of animal would you like to be added as a statue? The stone foundation blocks are a really nice way of giving definition to your pond area. You can go all the way along the edge and line things up a lot easier now with the new build settings, being able to toggle and choose which corner point you wish it to snap to. This enabled me to be able to overlap them and sink them into the ground, making things look a lot more natural. Any build you choose to do, it's always handy to have some sort of reference, just to give you a guide of where to start from. For a seating area, I've done a bit of googling and I quite like a look of this Koshikake. I decided to use this as a starting point and see where it takes me. Dimension wise, if you fancy trying it later on, it is 4 of the 2 meter beams length and 2 width wise. At the 4 corners are the 4 meter dartwood beams. I didn't want the seating to be low down to the ground, so I've added some of the half beams all the way along the edge to create a step. On top of these, placing down the plain benches. The roof was dead easy as it was just 45 degrees, followed by just a couple of serpent heads at the top. I was not keen on the roof showing like it did in the reference, so I just filled it in. To add more character details to this build, I've left gaps within the walls. The dartwood lattice adds some very nice detail into your builds. If you rotate them, they become 2 snakes coming together, facing each other, but they are one. That's the main shell done. Now for a little bit more detailing. Here's another nice little tip I've discovered. To change the snap point of one of the vertical beams, if you place down a horizontal one first, it will allow you to partially sink it into the ground. If you hold down shift, it will allow you even more finesse. This came in handy as I wanted a low down round table. Now back to the main island, and I had an idea of what I wanted to do, to make it the main focal point of the garden. In any build you're doing, don't be afraid of mixing up different textures. Using different coloured stones with wood will help contrast and give detail to any build that you do. I wanted a strong look at the base, so I've gone with the large stone foundations. To contrast the white stone, I then used the black marble as the pillars. This material has good stability, so I shouldn't run into any issues later on when I'm doing the roof. Roofing wise, I went with the dartwood beams to keep the theme along with the rest of the build. I had to go with a couple of 45 degree beams and then the 26 degree at top to make a peak right in the middle. Here's a nice roofing tip that should come in handy for you in the future, especially if you're ending up doing buildings like this that have got a rounded roof and not just square 45 degree angles. On each layer of your roof, start off with all the pieces that you can snap together easily. I try to do the ones at the edges first, and then anything that's in the middle. Instead of doing your roof from the outside, rotate your roofing piece and line it up from the inside. You can then hold down shift and use any of the internal detailing to line up with the other pieces. I find doing it this way a lot easier, and I think it has a better finish. Give it a try for yourself, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I briefly checked the structure from a distance to make sure I was happy before moving on with any of the finer details. This is good practice to do, and I didn't want to make the same mistake I did by committing to the bridge like I did earlier, then not being happy with the look of it from a distance and redoing the whole thing. If you want the look of your buildings to feel taller than they actually are, the more detailing that you can layer onto the top, the more your eyes will be drawn to it, even more so if you bring any of that detailing up to a point. If you're doing any larger builds, maybe a couple of buildings like this in a garden, or a large village or town, design wise, in my opinion, it's always better to reincorporate some elements that you've used in each building. Doing this will make the overall aesthetics a lot more pleasing to the eye. By tying your buildings together this way, it will make a lot more sense. You will see these methods used in every game you play, and many of the buildings in towns and cities. I've placed the banners directly in the middle of the 2 lattice sections. Your eyes will naturally follow the point of the banner to the detail of the lattice. Just another little design trick. Sometimes when you're doing a build, the things that you think will take the least time take by far the longest. I wanted a gravel path with edging, and instead of stones being inset with it, to keep with the theme with the rest of the build, I wanted to have the circular wooden discs inset inside. Overall, I was happy with how the build had gone, but I felt that it needed just one more building element to finish everything off. Not that I'm affected by advertising or films, but what came to mind was the shrine out of the film Mulan. I decided against using any reference images and just completely freeformed this one. To keep it nice and simple right at the start, I just went with the stone steps and an arch for the entrance. After that, I proceeded using the 4 meter dartwood beams to plan out what size footprint I wanted the shrine to be. I didn't want to go overboard and make a big temple complex. As this was for a shrine, I wanted the floor to be a little bit more elaborate. A simple but effective way of making your floor look a lot more interesting. After you finish doing the grid formation, at each of the corners you can lay the beams down diagonally, creating a simple cross in each of the squares. After you're done, snap your floor in pieces just below the top of the beams, and you will end up with a floor that looks like this. A nice way of bringing some detail to any of your entry points within your build is to create an apex using the inverted corner sections. The rest of this roof from now I just blocked out with the plain 45-degree angle, and the ridge sections to finish it off at the top. For the end walls I just repeated the same cross design, deciding for balance on the apex section to keep it plain. Whenever you're designing, it's always useful to have some plain areas. This in turn gives your eyes somewhere to rest, and in turn help the detail sections pop a lot more. To tie the design together, I reused the lattice design on the front and the rear walls. This time I decided to double stack them to allow more natural light to come through. I still didn't think this was letting in enough lateral light, so I knocked a skylight in the roof, filled it in with the 45-degree ladders, and used the dartwood beams to trim around the edges. That's the main shell of the building done. As you can see, the stairway doesn't really feel like part of the building. To help tie things in together, I decided to go with some pillars at the foot of the stairs, and a couple of the wolf head adornments at the top. Many times the most simple of additions can be the most effective. Here's a fun little trick you can do with the wolf heads. You can place item stands just underneath the wolf's chin, and if you then put a poison resistance potion on it, then the mouth of the wolf will have a nice green glow. If you want different colours, this will also work with the glowing mushrooms. If you don't want to use item stands, messing around with these heads did give me another idea. Snap one of the shorter pillars to the appropriate height underneath the wolf's head. Afterwards you can use any colour torch you want. Placing it on top of the pillar, you can then clip it through the head and have the flame at the mouth of the wolf. Hope you have fun messing about with this one. For a nice shrine as the focal point inside, the walled statue was really only the obvious choice, with wisp lights each side for a mystical glow, and I really do like the glow after you've activated them. To bring even more focus to the ward, I went with the red banners, colour contrasted with the blue jute, pointing directly down at the ward's head. Using lighting and framing items in this way, your eyes cannot help but be drawn to it, even more so at night. Time to put some fish in the pond. For the fish, using dev commands, I spawned 40 of the fish 4_cave. I like the size of these fish and also the pinkish red colour. A word of warning if you want to populate your pond with fish. If you grab a whole stack of 10 and throw them in, Valheim has clearly been designed by Viking dwarves, and that still only counts as one. A faster way to split down stacks. Shift click to select the item that you want to split. Then instead of using the slider, then on your keypad press any number between 1 and 10 or however large the stack is. This is a much quicker way of splitting down any stack you want and having an accurate number every time. Thank you very much for watching all of the video. I do hope you've enjoyed it and some of the tips and tricks coming useful for you. I would also like to say a big thank you to everybody that subscribed. This week I've just reached 500 people that have subscribed to the channel. The encouragement and support is very much appreciated. See you soon and take it easy.